The other day I made a video on what changes I had to make to my Analogue Pocket in order to enable it to play some of the games from the Game Boy series. So that's the original Game Boy, the Game Boy Color, and the Game Boy Advance. Now I shared that with a friend and he gave me some additional information for another method of doing the same thing. Well, I really shouldn't call this the same thing because in addition to adding support for the Game Boys, it adds support for a lot of other systems. The one kind of downside there is with this method is it does involve downloading an executable from the internet and running that. I'm a little hesitant to download an unknown exe and let it run on my system. So I downloaded it to a VMware instance, which you can kind of tell in this machine. You see that there's two start menus, and that's because the inner start menu is from within the VMware instance. Now, if you want to do the same thing, you can find this executable at this URL. Now, you copy this exe to the root of the SD card that you're going to be using in your Analogue Pocket. And when you allow it to run, it will download the latest firmware version and it will start downloading a lot of other cores so that your Analogue can emulate a lot of other systems. It does take quite a while to run, so this is the type of thing where you'll start it up and walk away. But after it got done, I came back. I put the memory card in the system and this is what I ended up with. After starting the unit, it did a firmware update, rebooted, and when I go into the Open FPGA option now, there are a lot more options as far as the consoles. Now it does have them grouped, so handhelds are in one group, console is another, so you'd find like your NES, the Super Nintendo, the Sega Genesis in there, and then there's also like a few computer categories on here. So I was kind of surprised. It added a lot of things I hadn't expected. So I did scroll through here just to see what the various things are. There's a lot of systems in here that I haven't heard of or haven't heard mention of in year, but this looks to be a pretty complete collection of systems on which to run. So starting up Lunar Lander for a second here just to see how it looks. So it's running. You don't get great contrast as it's being captured on the camera. So let me just back out of that and take a look at something else. So let's see, there's some other games on here. I recognize Qbert. Let's go in and take a look at how it appears. Now, I can't really play with the way that this is positioned, but it has the sounds that I'd expect it to have. This is pretty much a perfect recreation of the game. I'm going to press the start button, I think. Yep, that's the one. So yeah, hopping around is pretty responsive. I'm not actually trying to seriously play the game right now, but okay, that runs fine. Let's jump in and see what else is in here. So these are primarily arcade games from arcade systems that someone has ripped. Going back up to the top, let's see what else is in here. Asteroids. That's the classic. Okay, so it runs. So I'm pretty satisfied with the set of arcade games that I have in here. I did wonder whether or not my game I copied in here was still intact, and there it is. So Super Mario Brothers 3 is still intact, still there. Started it up. Everything looks like it is running just fine. So this method works. Despite it having worked, I still don't necessarily trust executables, random executables from the internet. So if I run this again, I will continue to run it within a VM. Take note that if you run it, whenever there are updates, all you have to do is run the executable again, and it will take care of doing the updates again. And it looks like it preserves things that are already there. So I might stick with using this method in the future, but still, only running it within a VM, or even better yet, maybe I'll copy it to a Raspberry Pi and run that on an isolated segment of my network. So this is worth checking out. I'll show the URL again here. Also, if you go down to the description for this video, you can find it there.